Welcome to a series that we call the End of Times, where we're going through the book of Revelation, verse by verse, to try our best to see what it is we can expect to happen in the end times, or the time Jesus refers to as the end of the age. Now, before we get started in this particular episode, I want to take some time and just talk about the importance of reading Revelation verse by verse. A lot of times, especially with the topic we're going to talk about today being the mark of the beast, a lot of people become experts when they read a blog, or they know a few verses of Revelation, but they're not really familiar with everything that is taking place during tribulation. A lot of times I see comments and I think to myself, clearly they have not read Revelation, or they haven't watched the previous 82 episodes. God has laid it out perfect. And to speculate on what the mark of the beast might be, or to act like for some reason you know what it is really just engaging in the activity that Jesus talked about, how in the end times there will be those false prophets arising and declaring things to deceive many. It's very important that you just focus on what the Word of God says. Also, in this series, we don't use anybody's commentary. We only use the Bible as a reference. So if you read something somewhere and now you're convinced that this thing is, and it wasn't from the Word of God, please don't comment below. It's very important on this particular episode that false prophets don't arise and deceive many, to confuse them on what this mark is, which is a damnation of eternity separated from God, fire and brimstone of hell. It is very important that people get it very clear what this is. So where we are in the book is we are in chapter 13, and we have just gone over the beast of the sea, the rise of the Antichrist, how he begins to war with the saints. That's the tribulation. People talk about there is no war with saints. What would tribulation be without that? That's literally what tribulation is. And then we see this other beast, this beast from the earth, who is a two-horned beast. It is of two people, and they are causing everybody with deception to worship the first beast and worship his image. And we're just going to pick it up right there in Revelation 13, starting verse 16. And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except for one who has the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Now, we're going to break this down into three different sections. We're going to talk about, first and foremost, why is this happening? Like, what's causing this to take place? And then we're going to talk about what the mark actually is. And then we're going to address the timing of it all to see what's taking place in this tribulation, that we can see this mark coming about. So let's just start with, why is this happening? Well, let's kind of go back for a second. When we go back to Revelation 13 and we talk about the beast of the sea, it says specifically, starting in verse 7, "And it was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. And all who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. He who leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints." I want you to kind of just keep those verses in mind as we continue of why is this happening. The Antichrist has declared himself to be God. And the moment that happens, Jesus gave very clear instructions to the Jews that when you see this happen, don't even take the time to pack. Just flee from Jerusalem. Get out. It's a bad day for the Jews in Jerusalem. It's also a bad day for Christians, because essentially he's going to force everybody to worship him or die. It's very, clear cut. It's not like there's this group over there and then there's this other group over there and there's this other group. No, it's either you worship him or you die. There is no middle ground in this scenario. Now, if we jump ahead, we kind of see, now we don't like to jump ahead in Revelation, but it's important that we see kind of what's taking place here. If we jump to chapter 14, just the very next chapter, what we see is we see three angels making some declarations. And the third one, it says in verse 9, then a third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast and his image, and receives his mark on his forehead or on his hand, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night who worship the beast and his image, and whoever receives the mark of his name. Here is the patience of the saints. Now there's that patience of the saints again. That's a critical piece of this. Here are those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. So there's this patience of the saints. Now that's why I kind of went ahead a little bit and went behind, because a lot of people that don't understand what's taking place just think that it's some sort of mark. Like you just, oh, go get a mark. All right, let me go get a mark or not get a mark. Like that's not what this is. There is a worldwide civil war taking place between the Antichrist and the saints. And this mark specifically addresses that, because we saw it with the angels, and then we also saw it when the description of the beast himself, the Antichrist, that there's this patience of the saints. And what is this patience? Like, what does that even mean? We did an episode on the patience of the saints, but let's address it here, because there's a warring against the saints that's going to take place. A lot of betraying taking place, and people are going to have to pick sides. There is no middle ground. Now, Jesus specifically addresses this. So in Matthew 24, the disciples are asking Jesus about the end times and what will it look like, and Jesus begins to talk in verse 4. He says, and Jesus answered and said to them, take heed that no one deceives you. There's that deceive we started talking about in the beginning. This is why it's so important. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many. There's the rise of the Antichrist. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass. But the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilence, and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginnings of sorrows. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will be offended, will betray one another, and will hate one another. Then many false prophets will rise up and deceive many. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. But he who endures to the end shall be saved. And the gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come. Everyone who walks the earth will have to choose sides. It is the war of the saints. It is a worldwide civil war where you will have to choose specific sides, and a mark will show what side you are on. It's the saints versus the Antichrist. Now, I want to kind of remind you of why this is, it's not just a war. There's more taking place here to this, because if we go back to the seals, the 7 seals, which again we covered, because this is way back in chapter 6, and it's at the 5th seal that we begin to see this happen. Chapter 6, verse 9, when he opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, how long, O Lord, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? Now comes in the patience of the faith. And a white robe was given to each of them, and it was said to them that they should rest a little while longer, until both the number of their fellow servants and their brethren who would be killed as they were was completed. And we know these to be the saints because if we jump to chapter 7, it says it in verse 14. These are the ones who come out of the great tribulation and washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. So this is a clear decision that people will be making to follow the Antichrist or to follow Jesus Christ. It's a very clear decision. Don't be fooled into people putting crazy things on the internet to think that you accidentally can receive the mark of the beast. You can't accidentally receive it. You can't like pick the wrong credit card. Oops, I accidentally got the wrong credit card. Now I got the mark of the beast. Or you maybe got a vaccine for your kids and now they're condemned to hell because it was the wrong vaccine. No, that's not what this is. Don't be fooled. It is a mark. It is a scratch or an etching that says, I am picking this side in the war of the saints. It's a very clear choice that you will be making, and most of the world will gladly be making it. Now, if we look at, well, what is this mark? Well, first of all, it's a requirement. You have to get it or die. It's not like you're urged to get it. It's a requirement to buy and sell goods, as all the Bible says. If we look at the Greek words, and he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark. And that word is Greek word charagma, which is an engraving, a stamp, a scratch, or an etching on their right hand or on their foreheads. Now, not on their right arm, not on their right thigh, not on their buttocks, not on the top of their heads, none of that. This is specifically on the right hand, the dexius right, cheros hand, or the metapon, the forehead, the front of the head. Specifically, God didn't get this wrong. It'll be a scratch, mark, or etching that is visual, somehow visual, on the right hand or the forehead, specifically to conduct commerce and show that you worship the beast. Receive it or die. It's a very, very clear choice that you will be making here. It's a visual thing imprinted specifically on those two parts of the body. Now, let's talk about the timing of it all. If we look at, let's go back to the 7 seals. If we look at the 7 seals, the way it all played out, seal number 1, there's kind of a strange shift in leadership. Seal number 2, massive conflict and war on the earth. Seal number 3, starvation and hunger. Seal number 4, widespread death and pestilence. And then it's at seal number 5 that we finally see the slaying of the saints. This is where the mark is coming. It's somewhere, so you have this causation. You have, massive starvation and famine. You have war, you have death and pestilence, and then there's this mark. So it's going to be easy to convince people to get it, because people aren't going to be able to carry cash around anymore or gold and silver. I mean, it's going to be a form of commerce that you're part of this worldwide system. You're either part of the system or you're not part of the system. If you're part of the system, you're good to go. If you're not part of the system, they're going to try to kill you. Now, they're also going to betray each other. It's going to be massive betraying. Fathers turning in sons, son turning in fathers, neighbors turning each other in. There's massive betrayal taking place as well. And it's at that 5th seal that we see this 3.5-year clock start ticking on the tribulation. Now, at Matthew 24, now that we kind of know that, if we go back to Matthew 24, Jesus said, "Take heed that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ." There's the rise of the Antichrist, declaring himself to be God, and deceive many. "And you will hear of wars and rumor of wars." So now there's this kind of, what's about to happen to all of us now that somebody's declaring, if we don't agree he's God, what's about to happen to us? "See that you are not troubled. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet." There's the patience that we must have. "For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom," because obviously a lot of nations are not going to be okay with this. "And there will be famines, pestilence, and earthquakes in various places, and these are the beginnings of sorrow. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you. And you will be hated by all nations," not some, all nations, "for my name's sake. And then many will be offended, will betray one another, and will hate one another. Then many false prophets will rise and deceive many. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. But he who endures to the end shall be saved. And this is the gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations. And then the end will come. So now let's go back to this mark in Revelation and read it again. Verse 16, and he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark of the name of the beast and the number of his name. And let's jump again to what the angel does. In verse 14:9, if anyone worships the beast in his image and receives his mark on his forehead or on his hand, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, who worship the beast and his image, and whoever receives the mark of his names. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. Then I heard a voice from heaven saying to me, write, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors and their works following them. It's about a war with the saints. It's foolish when people comment there is no war of the saints. That's foolish. That's what tribulation literally is. What's taking place here? Massive death, famine, war, followed by declaring an Antichrist declaring himself to be Christ, forcing everyone to worship him and receive his mark. And if you're not in on that, you're hunted down and killed. And those who endure till the end will be saved. And there's a patience in that. It's knowing that it's not a good day. You're hunted down like dogs, like feral hogs. You're on the run, and you think you're safe, and people will betray you. And when you don't have that mark on your forehead or on your hand, they're going to know who you are. And the world's pretty overpopulated. It's hard to hide anywhere. But be reminded that God prepares a place in the wilderness for us. So there you go. There's the mark of the beast, Revelation 13 verses 16 and 17. Again, please limit yourself from kind of throwing in random comments like, oh, it's this or it's that. I mean, it's a clear decision that you will make. Nobody accidentally gets condemned to hell. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son to die for the world so that we could boldly enter into his holy presence because he loves us. He's not going to allow us to be deceived. If you have the patience of the saints and you have the Spirit within you, you will see that mark come about. While everybody else freely takes it, you will see it. And when you refuse to take it, that's where the war really is at the heart of. Welcome to a series that we call The End of Times, where we're going through the book of Revelation verse by verse to try our best to see what it is we can expect to happen in the end times, or the times Jesus refers to as the end of the age. Now, as we've gone through the book of Revelation verse by verse, I want to take some time at the beginning of this video to just give you a disclaimer that, this is episode 83 or 84, and we've gone through the book verse by verse, and oftentimes when we get to passages like the ones we're going to go over today, people that just have heard of these passages, they're very familiar. Everybody's heard of the number of the beast, and suddenly people become experts. And it's very important to understand that God laid out the book of Revelation the way it is perfect. And oftentimes people who haven't studied the book of Revelation, they'll jump to things and they'll say, well, this is this and this is that in the world, and that's what this is in the world. And just want to warn you to be cautious of that. On this show, we only use the Bible as a reference. So literally, every single thing that we talk about as we've gone through the book of Revelation, we have then gone through other verses in the Bible to support what it is this is saying. Because When God laid the entire Word of God out, it's perfect. Everything that God had to say to all of mankind is in here, and it's perfect. And if you're just jumping to verses and saying you're an expert on it, you're really kind of distorting what it is the Word of God is actually trying to say. So, with that being said, where we are in the book of Revelation is we talked about the two different beasts. There's the beast of the sea. It's a 10-horned beast made up of 10 kings. And then we have the beast of the land, which is a 2-horned beast. It's a beast made up of 2 men who then cause the world to worship the Antichrist and force everybody to take a mark in order to buy or sell goods. And now we get to the verse we are, which is chapter 13, and we're just going to go back to 16, but we're picking it up in 18 is where we left off. So we'll go back to 16. And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark of the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. Now, I want to kind of go back and remind you just a little bit as we talked about what this mark is on the last episode. The mark is something that you knowingly take. God, in taking it, condemns you to hell, as well as what we're going to get through here in chapter 16 is the bowls of judgment. Those are poured out on those who take the mark. God is not going to condemn people to hell on accident. It's a purposeful decision you take to worship the Antichrist over Jesus, because what takes place in the forcefulness of this mark is the warring of the saints. There's a war taking place between those who stand up for Jesus Christ and the majority of the world who stands up for the Antichrist. And this war is a very brutal war that goes on for 3.5 years. So taking this mark is a clear decision. It's not an accident, like you got the wrong credit card or something like that. It's a clear decision you will make. Now, with that being said, let's talk about the number of the beast. Now, in order to really understand this, I kind of broke it down into what the original text, the Greek words here say. So I just kind of want to go through that real quick, because there's a lot of people can conjure up the number 666 in many different ways, but that doesn't necessarily mean it applies to the beast, because what this is it's here is wisdom. It's an identifying factor. It's a way to identify the Antichrist. So here is wisdom. Now, word is Sophia, skill. It's derived from human or divine insight of wisdom. So it's essentially, it's having skill, some sort of divine insight or human insight of knowledge to understand a thing. Let him who has understanding, and that word understanding is the word vav, which is intellect of the mind. It's kind of having a knowledge set. It's you have the wisdom and you have the intellect to kind of see, to put some things together to help you understand what this number means. So let him who has understanding calculate. Now I want to talk about that word calculate for a second. It's a word fesifado, which is to calculate. Also use pebbles to come to an enumeration. It was a method that Greeks would use for oftentimes voting or deciding on something. They would use this word and this terminology, but it is to calculate. It's to enumerate something. Calculate the number. Now that number is arithmon. It's a number. It means a number. Now I also want to say that that's the accusative version of that word, and we're going to come back to that because it uses the number twice here. So it's the word arithmon. So let him who has understanding calculate the arithmon, the number of the beast. For it is the number, and this time it's the word of the rhythmos, which is a nominative. And that I'm not getting into an English lesson here, but accusative versus nominative. Nominative is the subject of the next thing. So it's the number of a man. And that word man is anthropa, or a human being. So, and I bring up that numerative versus accusative because they say the word number twice in a sentence, and they use two different words for it. The second time they use the number, meaning it is attached to a human being. Now, let's use the word human being there for a second and just eliminate that this is a number of a government, or it's a number of a position, or it's a number of a group of people, or it's the number of a church. It's the number attached to a human being is literally the interpretation of the Greek words there. So it's very important that this is a human being with a number attached to him, or possibly two human beings, and we'll get to that here in a second. So it's the number of the beast, for it is the number attached to a human being. And his number is 666. Now, we're going to talk about that number for a bit. We're going to spend a good time talking about this number. The word that we're often going to see interpreted here for that number is hexakasoi, which is 660, and it's often interpreted 666. However, one of the original scrolls, a papyrus from one of the original writings of Revelation, actually gave the Greek word number 616, 616. So I just kind of want to throw that out there real quick. Which number is it? I couldn't tell you, because, you know, I always say, and my general reference is, if you don't know, go back to the original text. Well, if the original text says 616, there's some interpretation issues going on here. Now, with that being said, this video isn't to say, well, it's 616, it's not 666. What I'm saying is, if you see somebody who looks like the Antichrist, who acts like the Antichrist, but when you calculate their number, it equals 616, don't write that off. That could be the actual number. However, most interpretations are going to give you the 666 number, but it's 666, not six singular sixes. The number is 666, so it's very important that we see it as a three-digit number, not just three singular digits. So one thing I want to say before we get into how to calculate this number is that I find the number 666 very interesting because it's the limitations of man. God created humans on the sixth day. He told people to work for 6 days and then rest on the seventh. 7 is the number of perfection of omnipotent God. It's the number of perfection. And man cannot reach that number. So I find this number very fascinating because it's exactly the limitations of man. Every single digit in it talks about the maximum limitations of man, which is what the Antichrist is he's the maximum limitations of man, which is nothing compared to God. And that's all he is. He's a limited man who happens to be possessed by Satan and given great authority by Satan, but he's still just a man, and we have to that's why I love this number. All right, so what is the number of a human being? Well, most likely we're talking about Gematria. Now, what Gematria is Jewish math. Now, all prophecy relates to Israel somehow, so it would make sense that we would be, when it says to calculate the number of a man, that we would use Jewish name math to do so. And what it is essentially they give a value to each letter in a name, and depending on the order, then there's a calculation that's thrown in and you get a total of what the value of that name is worth. So there's a lot of Gematria calculators online. You can get online, you can throw in your own name and see what its value is. If you have some guesses on who you think the Antichrist is, you can throw in their names and see what that looks like. I also would encourage you to look at literal family names, because a lot of people's names have changed over the years from their original family heritage names. But look at it. It's fascinating. I don't begin to be a Gematria expert at all, but I can run a Gematria calculator. That I can do. So I do have my suspicions on who this person is. Again, I'm going to hold all that till we get to the section on Babylon. Then I'm going to kind of lay down who I think the Antichrist is and who these other players are. But I will also say that there's a chance that it's actually two people's names, because I want to talk about this beast that's making you do this is a two-maned beast. It's got two horns. It's made up of two men. So there's the probability that this number is actually attached to two men and not just one man. Again, I'm just going to stick a question mark on that. However, I do have my suspicions. So, there we are. It's... chances are this number is linked to one man, but it could be linked to two men. Gematria is going to be most likely your calculation, because it's, a lot of times we can say, oh, well, this guy lives at this address, and then he's got a building this tall, and then he's this president. He's, if you put all those numbers together, it equals 666. I don't believe that is what it is, because it specifically says, here is wisdom, which is skill or insight. It's having an ability to run numbers through a calculation. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding, the intellect of the mind, to calculate the number, to literally enumerate a number that isn't necessarily attached to anything of the beast. For it is the number, now it's attached to something of a human being. His number is 666. So that's what I believe that number is. It's a promise from God that if you have wisdom and you have insight, that He will show you what this means. Now, I also want to take this time, because as we talk about wisdom and understanding, I think it's important that we always take the time to pray for wisdom and understanding from God, because it's a prayer that He answers, and He promises you, if you ask for wisdom, He's going to give you wisdom. It may not be the wisdom you want, and it may not lead to the answers you want, but if you ask for it, He will give it to you. So I just want to kind of take this moment and just ask everybody to pray for wisdom, as we're kind of in this section where it says, hey, by the way, if you have wisdom and you have the ability for understanding, then you can actually calculate this number. I think it's important that we take the time to pray for that understanding and His wisdom as we continue through the book of Revelation. Having understanding and having wisdom is a prayer that God says yes to. So just want to throw that out. Take this time to pray for it. But ultimately what you're looking at a number. It's a calculation, most likely gematria, that is attached to a human being or two human beings. That's kind of what I get from these verses here. I didn't find any cross references in the Bible of numbers attached to men, other than the limiting factor of man being 6, the number of God of perfection being 7. This limiting factor is no wonder it is 666. It's the maximum limitations of a human. It's fascinating. Love to hear your thoughts on all that. Put it in the comments below. If you like this video, click like and subscribe. If you feel called to support this channel through Patreon, that link is also below. But the most important part of this channel is we take prayer requests, so never hesitate to send that in. Thank you for watching this episode of God, Family, and Guns. And as always, love God, love your family, and love guns.